Companies think leaving Salesforce means moving customer records. It does not. It means rebuilding years of rules, permissions, integrations, and employee habits while the business keeps running. The cheaper CRM can become the expensive choice. Customer, almost nothing happened. They typed a name, an email address, and perhaps a company size. Then they click submit. Inside the company, the same data can continue into scoring, forecasting, quoting, legal review, billing, support, executive reporting, and outside software. The subscription is visible. This dependency map usually is not. The more successfully a company connects Salesforce to the way it works, the less Salesforce behaves like an app it can cancel. It becomes infrastructure. The answer is not that its data is literally imprisoned. Salesforce provides export tools. The answer is that the data is only one layer of the system. The rest of the system is the company itself. Start with the obvious cost. As of August 2026, Salesforce lists its Sales Cloud Enterprise Edition at $175 per user per month, billed annually. Unlimited is $350. The Agentforce One Sales Edition is $550. Those are list prices, not a universal invoice. Enterprise software contracts can include negotiated terms, different products, add-ons, support, storage, usage, and discounts. But the pricing page reveals the basic shape of the business. Recurring access, sold per user, with more capability available in higher tiers. About 95% of Salesforce's fiscal 2026 revenue came from subscription and support. This is not mainly a business of selling a box once, it is a business of becoming a continuing part of how customers operate. Salesforce also reported $72.4 billion in remaining performance obligations at the end of that year. That number represents contracted revenue not yet recognized. It is not a measure of lock-in by itself, but it shows the scale of the future commitments already sitting inside customer contracts. The interesting question is what happens between the first license and the next renewal. A basic customer database contains names, companies, and contact information. A working Salesforce deployment can contain the rules that tell a company what those records mean and what should happen next. Take our new lead. The company may use a lead assignment rule to send large West Coast accounts to one team and small East Coast accounts to another. A record-triggered flow can create a task, send an email, or update another record. A custom field can record the product line, regulatory status, partner source, or renewal risk. A permission set can let one employee edit a sensitive field while hiding it from another. None of these choices is dramatic by itself, but each choice converts an informal business habit into configuration. Someone has to decide what counts as a qualified lead. Someone has to translate that decision into fields, conditions, ownership rules, alerts, and exceptions. Someone has to test what happens when the customer has no territory, when two divisions claim the same account, when a salesperson leaves, or when an integration sends incomplete data. Then employees adapt around the system. Managers build reports around its fields. Finance uses its stages in a forecast. Marketing relies on campaign attribution. Support expects the account history to be present. The CRM is no longer just storing the work. It is coordinating the work. The lock-in becomes easier to see if we separate it into 6 layers. The first is data. Accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, cases, activities, attachments, and historical records accumulate over years. Salesforce can export organizational data into CSV files. Depending on the edition, scheduled exports can run weekly or monthly. That sounds like an exit door, and it is an important one. But a collection of CSV files is not a functioning CRM. Salesforce notes that formula fields and roll-up summary fields are excluded from its data export service. More broadly, a record export does not automatically reproduce the behavior created around those records. Layouts, automation, permissions, dashboards, code, packages, and connections to other systems. The second layer is integration. The lead may have arrived from a website, an advertising platform, or a marketing system. It may leave for email, quoting, billing, customer success, data warehousing, or support. Each connection has authentication, field mappings, failure handling, owners, and assumptions. A replacement CRM must do more than accept the data. It must recreate every important conversation the old system was having with the rest of the company. The third layer is workflow. Automations often encode years of small decisions. Salesforce's own documentation warns that deleting a custom field referenced by a flow can cause that flow to fail. That is a tiny example of a much larger truth. Components acquire dependencies. Changing one piece can affect something that looks unrelated. The fourth layer is permission. Who can view a customer? Who can change a forecast? Who can export records? Who can approve a discount? Salesforce supports object level, field level, and record level access. Those controls may reflect security policy, job roles, contractual duties, or regulation. A migration has to rebuild that logic without exposing information or blocking the people who need it. The fifth layer is people. Users learn where information lives. Administrators learn the organization's exceptions. Consultants learn why a strange field exists. Executives learn to trust particular reports. Even the unofficial workarounds become institutional knowledge. Replace the platform, and that knowledge does not transfer automatically. The sixth layer is the contract. Renewal dates, license counts, support plans, add-ons, and multi-year commitments create their own timing. A company may know it wants to leave and still decide that the operational risk cannot be reduced before the next renewal. These 6 layers compound. That is why switching cost is not one invoice. It is a temporary multiplication of systems, labor, and risk. Imagine that the company chooses a cheaper CRM. The license comparison may look convincing, but during migration, the company can pay for the old platform and the new platform at the same time. It needs people to inventory fields and automations. It needs a data model for the replacement. It needs connectors rebuilt or replaced. It needs permissions mapped. It needs old records cleaned. It needs testing environments. It needs employees trained. It needs reports reconciled. It needs a cutover plan and a rollback plan. And it must do all of this while salespeople keep selling and customers keep expecting service. The old system contains known frustrations. The new system contains unknown failure modes. Testing reveals why this is not an ordinary software swap. Salesforce documents 4 kinds of sandbox or isolated test environment. A developer sandbox copies configuration. A partial copy sandbox can include a selected sample of production data. A full sandbox can replicate production records, attachments, and metadata for staging and performance testing. Those environments exist because changing a live business system is dangerous. Now imagine reproducing the same confidence in a different platform. The migration team needs representative data without mishandling sensitive records. It needs test cases for the ordinary lead and the strange lead. It needs to know whether a reassigned territory changes ownership, whether a failed integration retries, whether a discount approval reaches the correct manager, and whether the new forecast agrees with the old one. Then users must test the parts nobody included in the project plan. The spreadsheet a regional manager uploads every Friday. The report finance reconciles before the board meeting. The field a support agent checks before promising a replacement. The automation created 3 administrators ago because one major customer required an exception. This hidden inventory is why migration estimates often become less certain as discovery improves. Learning more does not create the complexity. It reveals complexity that was already operating. And until the new system can handle the critical paths, the old subscription is not redundant. It is insurance. This creates the migration paradox. The company may believe leaving will reduce long-term cost, while the short-term act of leaving creates its greatest period of cost and operational risk. Salesforce describes this mechanism unusually clearly in its own annual report while discussing competitors. The company says prospective customers may be reluctant to migrate away from their current enterprise software because they have invested substantial personnel and financial resources implementing and integrating it. That observation is not unique to Salesforce. It is a property of enterprise software, but it applies in both directions. Once Salesforce becomes the incumbent, the investment protecting a competitor can begin protecting Salesforce instead. Calling this lock-in does not mean the customer made a mistake. The same features that make Salesforce difficult to replace can make it valuable to keep. A common data model can reduce fragmented spreadsheets. Assignment rules can move leads without manual triage. Automation can create consistent follow-up. Permissions can protect sensitive information. Shared dashboards can give leaders one view of a pipeline. A large partner ecosystem can make specialized help and integrations easier to find. Salesforce says its own internal Agentforce deployment made quote creation 75% faster. That is a company claim about its own implementation, not independent proof that every customer will see the same result. But it illustrates the fair defense. If a platform removes enough coordination cost, the dependency is not automatically bad. A hospital depends on its clinical systems. A bank depends on its transaction systems. A logistics company depends on routing software. Important systems are supposed to become embedded. The real problem begins when the organization cannot tell whether the dependency is still earning its cost. The visible subscription may increase while the original implementation logic becomes harder to understand. New products may be added because integration is easier than evaluation. Old fields remain because nobody knows what depends on them. Consultants preserve complexity that the internal team cannot safely change. Reports multiply, but trust in the numbers falls. At that point, the company is not simply paying for Salesforce. It is paying for uncertainty about Salesforce. Salesforce does not build this dependency alone. Its annual report says the company's success depends on a growing community of third-party developers and vendors building applications, integrations, data, and content that complement its services. That ecosystem is part of the product's value. It is also part of the switching surface. A company may employ Salesforce administrators and developers. It may hire a consulting partner for implementation. It may install applications from AppExchange. It may connect middleware, analytics, backup, marketing, quoting, and document tools. Each decision can solve a real problem faster than building from scratch. Each decision can also add another contract, skill set, data path, and dependency to the eventual migration. Salesforce itself says customers sometimes require highly skilled and trained service professionals to implement its applications. Those services may come from Salesforce, the customer, third parties, or a combination. The software bill therefore captures only part of the economic system. The rest appears in salaries, consulting statements of work, integration fees, training, testing, governance, and the opportunity cost of employees who maintain the platform instead of doing something else. None of this proves that Salesforce is overpriced. It proves that price per seat is an incomplete unit of analysis. This distinction matters because software debates often collapse into a simple question: can we get our data out? For Salesforce, the answer is generally yes. The platform offers exports, APIs, and other data tools, but portability has at least 3 levels. The first is record portability. Can the company retrieve accounts, contacts, opportunities, and activities? The second is semantic portability. Does the company know what every field means, which value is authoritative, and how records relate? The third is operational portability. Can another system reproduce the approvals, routing, permissions, integrations, reports, and employee actions that make those records useful? A CSV export helps with the first level. Most migration risk lives in the second and third. This is why a successful exit begins long before a company selects a replacement vendor. It begins by understanding its own operating model. Before the next renewal, a company can ask 6 questions. 1. Data portability. Can we produce a current inventory of important objects, fields, attachments, history, and retention requirements? Can we explain what would not survive a basic export? 2. Integration ownership. Do we know every system that sends data to Salesforce or receives data from it? Does each connection have a named owner and a documented failure process? 3. Workflow ownership. Can someone explain why each critical automation exists, which business rule it enforces, and what breaks if it changes? 4. Permission ownership. Can we map access by job function rather than copying years of exceptions into a new platform? 5. Training and knowledge. Which processes live in documentation, which live in the heads of administrators, and which live only in user habit? 6. Contract exit cost. What are the renewal dates, notice periods, overlapping license costs, support obligations, and realistic time required for testing and cutover? If a company cannot answer these questions, it is not ready to migrate. But the audit still has value. It shows where the organization is losing control of a system it may choose to keep. Documenting integrations reduces outage risk. Simplifying permissions improves security. Removing obsolete automation lowers maintenance. Clarifying field definitions improves reporting. Testing exports improves resilience. Exit readiness and operational discipline are often the same project. Salesforce sells software subscriptions, but the durable product inside a mature customer is larger. It is a negotiated set of definitions about customers, ownership, access, process, and performance. Salesforce stores and executes many of those definitions, while employees and partners maintain the rest. That is why a cheaper replacement can be expensive. The company is not replacing a database. It is translating part of itself. And translation is slow because every rule has history, every exception has an owner, and every dashboard has someone who relies on it. The lesson is not to avoid powerful software. It is to measure dependency while the system is still working. Not for the first time, when the renewal is due or the migration has already begun. We created a 6-part software lock-in audit for that conversation. It follows the same surfaces in this investigation: data, integrations, workflow, permissions, training, and contract exit cost. Because the best time to learn whether software is too expensive to leave is before leaving becomes the only plan.